Years. I bought this compressor back when I was, 18 years old, maybe younger, maybe 17 or 16. And I have 15.7 CFM now, and I've had this compressor for a while. Maybe it doesn't put out as much as it used to. I'm not sure. It still does pretty well. It keeps up really good. It doesn't get hot. And I think it's a 2-stage. I got it because it had a fan shroud. It's by Puma. It's a good brand. But we're going to talk real quick about what you need if you're doing some stuff at your house. And one of the good guys who always watches the videos, he's in an apartment and he's got a garage that's far away from his apartment. And I'm going to talk about, and maybe you have this kind of situation. Maybe you don't have a lot of power, and you still want to do your own work on your car, and you'd like to buy a compressor and figure out how to do that. So I'm going to tell you guys quick how to do that, what tools to get, what compressor to get, because not everybody's going to be able to start out with one of these. Eventually, you're going to want a compressor like this, at least a 5 horsepower, 60 gallon. I actually would like to get the 7.5 that's 28 CFM. That would make me really happy right now, but this one gets me by okay. Do I need more compressor? Sometimes, yeah, but you can get away with a smaller one just if you're just starting out and you're trying to do a few things. Let's go around and take a look at a few things and talk about what you need. So in order to run a smaller compressor, basically when I first started, when I was doing this stuff when I was 16, 17 years old, I had a 2 horsepower, it was by Sanborn, old company, I don't even know if they're still around, 2 horsepower, 20 gallon compressor, and I think it had a higher CFM. So you try and want to, I think it was around 7 CFM. And you're really trying to get the most CFM for your buck is what you're trying to get with your compressor. 20 gallons minimum with air. So if you're just starting out, you don't have anything, eventually you're going to want to get that 5 horsepower, 60 gallon. But let's talk about a starting point where you're going to start out and what tools you can use and what tools you can buy that aren't expensive to start out doing your own work. One of the things that I use a lot is I use my polisher, because that is electric and it doesn't require doesn't require any air pressure. But for sanding, if you have a 2 horsepower 20 gallon or maybe a little bit bigger, if you can find something that's around 7 CFM at least, that might work okay for sanding even with this sander. This is the Aircat 6310. It does not use that much air. That's why you'll see a lot of these videos. I'll be talking about CFM, and CFM is cubic feet per minute for your air. So you want to try and find tools that are low CFM use, and this is definitely one of them. This sander does not use much CFM, and it has a lot of power. It's the most bang for my buck I've ever used, and I've used tons of different sanders. I've probably had 30 or 40 different sanders over the years. So let's talk about some painting equipment. So for spray guns, if you're on a low air use, the best thing is these LVLP spray guns. They do not use a lot of air to run. You could probably get one of these and use it for paint and primer. I picked this one up here on Amazon for 50 bucks. Okay, and it is actually a decent spray gun. It's very cheap, as far as cheaply made. It doesn't feel like, but it does have the easy clean setup where a lot of the cheap ones have a tapered on tapered fit. That's something to look for. This one has a seal. You can see the seal around it, and that seal, you see that white part, that's the seal that seals it versus the taper on tapered fit, and those always fail after a little short period of time. But so this is a good low air use LVLP. They only make, I think, 2 of them that are made. One's by a copy of the SATA. Unless you want to spend $1 million, you can buy a SATA. If you can do that, you might as well buy yourself a big compressor in a garage and everything. So this is, I think this is the copy of the Iwata. I don't know, there's a video out somewhere on that, where the SATA I think is on the side, the Iwata is in the back. That's my guess. I'm just going by what I think right now. I don't have any clue on the details of that, but you can check out another video on that if you wanted to. But this is a great spray gun for just doing, if you don't have a lot of air use, you could paint a whole car with this thing and do a fairly decent job. Let me just show you. I just used this. I had to touch up my dash on the camper van, so I didn't want to use my regular spray gun because I didn't want to have to, I covered everything up, but I didn't want to have a lot of overspray while I was doing that, because I didn't want to have to move everything. You know, it'd take me 2 or 3 hours to set up the really good spray gun to do that. So let's take a look at that real quick. So this has actually been a very good investment, and it's very cheap for a starter person. $50 and huge high quality, you know, I mean, as far as, it's about the best $50 spray gun I've ever seen. So the only thing, this turned out really pretty smooth. I mean, there's not really much orange peel. I put some accelerator in this, so it's already dry. I did this like an hour ago. And there's really not much for orange peel. I was able to lay this down pretty smooth with that spray gun at a very, very low pressure, maybe 6 or 7 pounds. And it's not bad looking. I mean, I don't know if doing a whole car with it, if you could get it to look that good, but even if you couldn't, you can always cut and buff it, and, you know, or do it in sections maybe, and that would be the way to do it. I mean, I would just cut and buff it. I'd try to do the whole car with it. But the fan seemed pretty narrow with it. It wasn't a huge fan, but I didn't have it turned up that high. I think if I turned up the air a lot more, I'd probably have a pretty good sized fan. But, you know, that's an acceptable finish. That's not bad. That's pretty smooth, and that's with that spray it. And, you know, I had to reshoot because I buffed through right when on the dash. So actually I put the production clear on here, and I should have put the good stuff. I'm gonna start using just the good stuff from now on, because it just goes on better, it buffs better, it's harder, it's just much better, clear than the production. The production is just, I thought it'd be okay for the jams, but I think I'd rather just spend the extra money. It's only $30 more for the good stuff. So let's talk about more about this issue with getting the power out to where you're at. So apparently, when you're, you know, one of the things I had a long time ago is I only had like one plug in my garage, and I used, with my welder, I was using this, and I hooked it up with this 10 gauge extension cord, which, Jesus, I think that was about $100. But you're going to need a large extension cord to have less resistance. If you're going to run your compressor, and let's say you got a work area that's 100 yards or 50 yards from your house, and, you know, the longer the work, the further away it is, and if you're going to run a compressor, the larger the extension cord you're going to need. That's why I have this one on my welder. It's really not quite enough for the welder, but it does work. So they have some larger ones at Harbor Freight Tools that aren't too expensive. I think they have get the biggest one you can afford. Let me just put it that way, if you're working far away. As far as looking for a compressor, if you're just starting out, you also would want to have yourself a polisher like this to do a lot of you could use this as a grinder and as a sander. Really would help you get started doing your own thing. If you're having your shop if you're just starting out, you want to get a compressor. There's some fantastic deals on Craigslist for used ones sometimes. I did see a friend of mine just sold a 5 horsepower 60-gallon compressor for $150 on Craigslist. He could not get anybody to give him $200 for it. He was just like, "Oh my God," because it looked terrible. It looked like it was pieced together, but the thing worked fantastic. It's a 220 though, so you know the best way if you have 220 is going to get you less resistance and run a longer air hose. If you let's say you have a place near your house, but you're working far away, you can put the compressor near your house and then run a really long air hose. That will also help you not have as much resistance on that extension cord, because running a long extension cord with a compressor can cause the breakers to trip in the house. So definitely get a very, very large extension cord and run it when you run it far away, and try and find something in the neighborhood of, I think there's even 3 horsepower compressors out there that run on 110 that are more efficient than my old 2 horsepower 20-gallon would run on 110 or 220, and it was the most I could get on a 20 amp breaker at the time. So maybe the new ones now will run on 20 amps. So you got to kind of try and get the most, say that you got a 20 amp breaker in your house, try and find one that's like, 19 or something like that, pretty close to the top amperage that you can run, and make sure that that's going to work out in the most CFM at the same time. So look at the CFM rating and also look at the amps that it draws. But 2 horsepower 20-gallon will usually get you just barely started, and it's anything smaller than that, they really don't do much. You can run that little spray gun on a little bitty, I think 1.5 horsepower one or something like that. Those little 6-gallon ones from Harbor Freight Tools. That thing will run on one of those. They're amazing. That little spray gun will. Because actually, that's what I'm going to use in the field. I have a very small compressor. I'll show you what that one's like. So I have this one is for my field work. It's just a little, I think this is 4-gallon, and I think it's 2 horsepower. And I needed one that would run on a 20 amp breaker because my compressor or my generator only puts out 20 amps that I bring with me, the ultra quiet generator. So this one will work with that little spray gun all day. I haven't tried it with the sander. Maybe I should, just to see if it will. Be curious to know. But as far as for painting, I've used this before with the LVLP gun. I tried it with the regular gun, and it just didn't put out enough air to do it. So I don't know that it would put enough air to run a sander either. But the 5 horsepower 60-gallon, or no, 5 horsepower 60-gallon is really what everybody wants, at least a minimum. But when you're just starting out, I remember using a 2 horsepower 20-gallon, and that's really about all I can tell you. In a large extension cord, very, very large. All right, so that's it for your just starting out air tools. If you're just trying to do a few things, that's what I started out with many years ago.